My name is Heather Sims, and today I would like to take you through the presentation on assessment and tracking for low-skilled learners. So this is part of the Digital ACE project, which began last summer as a response to the pandemic. And as you can read here, the intention was to help adult learning providers to enhance their offer to learners under these conditions as we moved to blended learning. So there were a group of trainers, teachers and coordinators from all over the country who came together over the summer to work, and then a winter programme of events was put on, and this was one part of them. So this session was a discussion between mainly tutors from different areas who wanted to discuss some of the concerns and lessons they were learning from teaching online. So at this point, I have to look back and say we have really come a long way. When you look back at last March with the scramble to get online, the discovery of just how many learners were struggling to get to grips with technology. The same thing for tutors as they had to grapple with new technology. Some had already done quite well, same with learners, but others were struggling. And so this area was focusing really on low-skilled learners rather than low-level learners, although there tended to be a very close crossover. And yes, we were at the start of the journey last year, really, and we've definitely been moving along quite nicely. So, of course, moving online, one of the things that must strike everybody is the wonderful possibilities for us and our learners to form new networks and new connections, to become more autonomous in learning, in taking technology and making it a medium for self-expression and self-discovery and for learning. And already many of our learners are taking that challenge very nicely. But for others, it can be still a struggle. We know there's an awful lot out there, and this was one of the discussions that came up, how to harness what we have and how to assess what was happening and track what was going on. So this slide is really about the other side of the story. If you're a learner with low skills, perhaps you regard the wonderful technology as something that's just beyond you, and there you are gazing at other people doing it, but you are not at the start of your journey. So the first point of contact would be really, the first thing to assess would be, what is the starting point for our learners? Very often people say that they can't do anything at all, and then it turns out actually they can do something. So maybe they know how to take a photo or make a phone call. They might even know how to do a WhatsApp or a text, and that is our starting point, our way in to guiding them forward. And so the first assessment, the initial assessment, might be through a phone call or a simple form. It could be a one-to-one with somebody, but we're really saying, what do you want to do in the world? How can we help you in that way? Can we keep it realistic? And what ways do we have of communicating with you? So the technology really is very important to us now. And then thinking about how we can equip learners to go forward with the technology. Can we offer them something, for instance, an iPad or a laptop? Can we offer them LSA support so that they have someone who'll guide them through if there's no one at home that can do it? What are the basics that we can help them with? In my own service, we have what we call a big red button service, which a tutor can use or a learner can use, which is when they flag up that they would like individual attention, perhaps for an hour, to get them started on something, to help them set up a Gmail account or give them basic skills so that they can join a class. in other areas, I know people are working together so that tutors work together, perhaps with an LSA or a buddy, and similarly they work with learners independently. In some areas, they've set up drop-in days where learners can come along. They may feel highly embarrassed at not being able to use their gadgets or the phones or their devices, and so they come in and they quietly get the tuition they need to get them launched. And so that really is an enabling service which addresses digital poverty. Having established that, of course, for all of us, safety has to be the first concern. So establishing ways of behaving, ways of recognizing scamming, things that can happen online, monitoring safety is right up there in terms of both assessing and making sure our learners can assess situations for themselves and that they know how to get help. And so making sure that information is with them, however that's transferred during the induction phase, and then that you return to do that. And that is one area that will be closely assessed going forward. In addition to that, well-being is now right at the forefront of what we do, because we are seeing into people's homes very often, and we may see situations which we are having to assess in terms of safety, in terms of what the learner is actually showing us in the background, and deciding what to do about it. So it's important that tutors are also well aware of the systems that are in place and the protocols to follow, and also ways to reach out for learners, to signpost if you see things that need addressing. Can you signpost the learner to help? So that brings us on to looking at what the learner needs are in terms of their path forward. All learners are different, and they will need their independent learning steps just as they would if they were in a classroom. And your provision may be a form of blended learning. That seems to be very current. Or it may be that your learners are having to work just from at home. Either way, you will need a discussion with them, a one-to-one perhaps, or I know in some cases, some providers are using Google Forms so that they can compile a profile of the learner and use phone calls as backup so that they can establish a good program going forward. There are still online platforms such as BKSB, but they do require a bit more use of devices. And these ILPs will be, the independent learning sets will need to be reviewed now, because as learners progress and lives change and the pandemic changes, people's priorities are going to change. And so we will need to be flexible in this and review the progress and what we're being told by our learners. So this is really to represent the discussion we had around the many resources that are out there to help us with assessment. So things that came up were WordWall, Google Suite, or Workspace now, Menti, quizzes, Q&A. Lots of things came through, using a learning journal, using mini whiteboards and Jamboards, all kinds of ways that we can set up surveys and quizzes for our learners so that they can respond. And also thinking about the ways that learners respond. As we know now that some learners are very happy to share whatever they feel like sharing. Others like to be knowledge-based and will share if they have something that they're very certain of, that perhaps they've researched or they happen to know. Others won't respond if they're asked a direct question, but otherwise stay quiet. And some learners are there, but really don't say very much online. And for those particular learners, looking at quizzes and other ways that they can respond is very, very helpful. We also discovered that some tutors have created signs that they can use so that they are not having to speak the whole time. So this is something that could be developed with learners too. So holding up either nodding and shaking their heads, or holding up an appropriate sign, whether it's the traffic lights for yes, go ahead, sort of green, yes, I know this, amber, I'm not so sure, and red, absolutely no, I don't know this. Or it could be a tick and a cross. It could be a thumbs up, thumbs down, or so. Different ways that learners can quickly communicate with the tutor that they have understood something or not, or using their little hand that they have on the screen in some cases, such as Meet. Whichever way you choose, I think the comment came up, and I think Jeff Petty's also made it, that although there are lots of ways out there of communicating with learners and having them communicate with us, it's really not the clicking that causes learning, it's the thinking. And so we are busy finding ways at the moment of working with learners to support them, and also to make them the expert in what we're doing. So collaboration is really the name of the game. We know in ideal circumstances that learners would be speaking for 80% of the time, or active for 80% of the time. And as tutors, we would be active for 20% of the time, directing, helping them, and checking and feeding back. Perhaps when you're initially setting off the learners, that's not the case at the moment. But I think as soon as possible, assess your learners' confidence and try to give them opportunities to speak, to participate, to show whatever it is, so that they are online. If you can get them to be there with their videos on, if possible, so that you can see how they're responding to you. That does give you an assessment route, which if they're not visible to you, is far more limited. You are aiming to try to use the expertise of your learners, whatever walk of life they are from. And so aim perhaps some of the teaching around where you find their experience is. That hasn't changed since they were in the classroom, but I think it's more important to tap into what learners know, because that's their comfort zone. And use the time between sessions to prime learners, because everything happens very quickly in the session, and some learners do need processing time. And so to get a fair assessment of what they can do, give them the time, give them fair warning, so that they can prepare during the week. And many learners, even with quite poor skills, if they know what they're aiming for, would be talking about things with family, or on the phone with friends. They might be reading something or thinking about things. If they understand what they've got to do, they will use the time. And I've certainly found during the pandemic that learners are very keen to be online. Once they can do it, they are very, very happy to collaborate with other people, because they haven't had the social links in the same way for a lot of people. And so if you can increase the time they spend between sessions, the value of the work you're doing is going to increase. And you will also get a better feel for how they're able to work independently. Teaching the language as you go is really, really helpful. So giving that scaffolding to learners so that they are able to interact in the class when they're there. So for instance, those questions like, why does this happen? Or could you explain that? Or what makes this happen? Or why did you do that? Questions which learners can quite easily put to each other. And it reduces the time for the tutor having to ask those questions and sitting as an expert And then it allows the tutor to step back more quickly, provided that learners know how to speak to one another. So in this slide, we see what I'm thinking of as people meeting first challenges and then moving forward. But it's not enough just to overcome one challenge. That challenge is going to appear again. And so it's very important that we are checking how well the skills are embedded that we are teaching, going back over them and checking in with learners. What did you learn? What was useful to you? How did you use it? How could you use this going forward? What stood out for you in this week's work? Could you write it down for me? And then could you share that with another learner or with the class? Can you give prompts so that they are aware of what you're asking for? You've got a very visual possibility here with pictures. Perhaps use those at the end and then ask learners what they think that the image might represent for them. And careful listening. If you're listening to your learners, you will be really finding out a lot. By stepping back, I have observed a wonderful lesson with a tutor where she presented a maths problem and just stood back and let the learners work it out between them. And a group of 4 learners without interruption went through so many different processes of working out exactly, reading the question very carefully, really understanding what was in the question, and then challenging each other about that, and then checking their working method going through, and then trying out several different ways of approaching a question. And the tutor did intervene twice, but only when she felt that something just wasn't clear and could do with clarifying, and then at the end to consolidate the learning that had happened and revise the processes that had taken place. And so this is a super way for a tutor to be present, but allowing the learners to be active. And I think there is a tendency for a tutor to feel that they should really be leading everything. It's a bit like being an entertainer because you're on screen. But in fact, that doesn't need to be the case. Remember that everybody sees a grid, not just you see a grid of faces. So if you can encourage your learners to be brave and participate, you will have much more of a clear view of how they're getting on. And another way that you can help them is to give them a good example first. This is what a good one looks like. Why is this good? If I took this photo example and asked you why I've used it, I'm sure you would come up with quite a few reasons and ideas around it. You've got people monitoring, you've got people on the side watching, you've got the participants, you've got the challenges there, and I'm sure that you would be coming up with ideas. And so using a picture stimulus can do the same thing for learners once they get into it. I think that's a fun way to assess their thinking. Tracking learners when they're online is essential. They may be producing evidence for you, such as the learner journal. If they're able to be online, they might know how to just do a little video of themselves or send you some audio. Sometimes people are doing this, particularly low skilled learners may learn to do this so that they can communicate with family and friends, and they forget to tell you that they do that. So it's something that we can tap into and use. People are very different, and given the same situation, they will take their own individual routes. So it is a good idea to give lots of options, but also to collate what you get in one place. If you're using Google Classroom, I'm not promoting it, but if you do use it, there are many ways that you can do that and actually keep everything easily in one place. But you probably already have a system for or a grid that you use and that you're familiar with for tracking. One way that you can also do this is to ask your learners to dictate to you. And then if you're sharing a screen, they can review with you what you're writing. And that can be taken as a recording or of what's happened. I also have one learning support assistant who works with a low-level student who has taken a very long time, but really persisted with technology. And she now records her with her permission and also sends me a report of how they've got it on in their session. And they both really enjoy putting this together. So that's a super record of what's been happening and how things are progressing there. The reason for tracking, not only is it useful in itself to have all the evidence, in fact essential, but ultimately we want to base new decisions on those assessments. So we're really looking at the purpose for assessing. So why are you assessing your learners? That formative assessment can be totally informal, so learners are chatting or the learners are working together and you are just listening in, or it could be that you're very well aware that they have assessments coming up now that the exam boards have said what's happening. You may need to be assessing them for that. If you can encourage them to self-assess and peer assess by doing a task, it could be that you ask learners to suggest improvements or say what they felt went particularly well in what a learner has done. You could be getting them to use a slide. If they have someone who can type, or you might be doing the typing for them, type onto a slide just to say what went well this week. It depends on your purpose, whether you just want feedback or whether you're really looking to see whether those skills are now embedded. And you will be looking to plan going forward. Even we are having to, and it's a good thing to be changing our plans as we go along, because this is such a changing field at the moment, and some learners are really getting to grips with the technology and they're enjoying it, and that is increasing their speed of work. And also, once they understand that they can research things and they are Googling, which they may be doing in other fields in their own life anyway, they may be coming back with more knowledge than anticipated. And so it does really pay to talk, perhaps one-to-one, sometimes with learners, and inform your planning from there. And another reason for doing exactly that is to make sure that the whole group is heading in the right direction. One point about that is perhaps to build in every week a time for discussion. Sometimes it happens right at the beginning of a session where learners are just chatting, or it can evolve quite naturally. I think personally that's a wonderful thing when it happens, so that you can sit back, let the learners chat, and they will probably generate ideas you haven't thought of, and they will also help each other in ways that may surprise you. The communication is a way of building confidence between learners. There are times when learners just have to trust you as a tutor that they are going in the right direction. And it's very important that we keep a firm, a clear idea in our heads of where we're headed. So if we're going towards the assessments, then it could be that keeping things very simple in terms of technology, but really making sure that the work is understood, that it's your learners are completing their work, encouraging them, reassuring them as you assess them, giving good feedback. And even though sometimes things may not make sense to them, giving those explanations of where you're headed and why things are happening the way they are can help. But we are dealing with adults, and for many people, learners bring so much to the class that they will often support peers in ways that are astounding. And the peer assessment angle is one certainly to develop. And at the end of this, I will put in some ideas for peer assessment and peer collaboration. So learner views, so what went well, what's helped you, what are you pleased with, on a scale of 1 to 5, what prompts do you want to give your learners so that they respond to you? One of the things I've noticed with technology is that once you've discovered something like Google Forms, you might feel like creating a lot of questions. But I think it's important to go back and simplify those questions and make sure that you are asking learners just the ones you need to reply to, because nobody wants to be asked loads and loads of questions. So just the ones that you need to. And there's always another time if you need to come back and ask other ones. But learners' views are so important. And while you're teaching online, it can be difficult to really get the same sense of how it's coming over to learners, how they're feeling about things. And so taking the time to get that feedback, to get the reflections from learners is essential. When things are in flow, we do have moments online where we have good focus, we have the behavior we want, attendance is good, the group is cohesive, everybody's patient. If there are connectivity problems, we're getting used to them, so we overcome those. And therefore the mood is good, and that's reflected in the work that's coming through. At that point, I think it's important to just check the challenges that are being set, because it would be possible to say at the beginning, we were maybe thinking technical problems, so keep the challenges fairly easy once people arrive in your teaching session, so that they feel they achieve. But once they're getting to grips with technology, it's important to keep that stretch and challenge coming in, so that learners really feel they're getting the benefit of being in your sessions, and that they are learning as they move along. And a further check would be to go back to the ILP. So check your independent learning plans and the independent learning steps, not just to see that they're achieved, but are they really, what you're doing, is it really helping your learners to achieve their longer term goals? And what will they be going on to? Because we have to remember that for some learners, we are a stepping stone. They're looking to move on with their lives. And so in any way that we can equip them to do that, and technology is a big way, we should be doing that, and really trying to help as much as possible. So at this time of year, we'll soon be coming to looking at next steps. So is it a further course, or are they trying to find employment, or how are things changing for your learners? Just check in with them and signpost. And this is my last slide, and just to say that I think we already are brave in this new world. We have tried up lots of strategies, and we still are. And of course, there are sort of several steps to getting to the point of being really innovative. But I think we are well on our way. A lot of tutors already are, and learners are too. So I just wish you the very best going forward. And I hope that the advances you've made with technology and working with your learners will really not just pay off this year, but that you'll continue to expand your repertoire, and that assessment and tracking is just one of the areas that you will well, extend and enjoy. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation.